The Colorado Conservative, AM 560, KLZ.
I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about the miserable, screwed-up world of local government.
We know things are bad, worse than bad. They're crazy. Punks are running wild in the street. There's nobody anywhere who seems to know what to do, and there's no end to it.
I feel that this country is being destroyed by its philosophy. Let us all make a sacrifice. Let's lower our standard of living, and we'll all be living better. Now, is that a proper philosophy to tell a country that has pride and self-esteem?
Do we believe in America where we, the people, interact voluntarily to determine who the winners are? Or do we want a president to dictate who the winners and losers are?
That's not fair.
Our Constitution is a document in which we, the people, tell the government what it is allowed to do.
And we have come to tell all who will hear us that we have come to defend the republic that our founding fathers have given to us. And we will not stand down in the face of our enemies. We will defend the Constitution against enemies, foreign and domestic.
You were to hear a report on the world's crisis. That is what you were going to hear.
I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. I've had it with you, and I've had it with this whole damn government.
I am a free man. Don't tread on me.
Let's get started.
This is Grassroots Radio Colorado with Jason Worley and Ken Clark on KLZ 560, The Source.
And normally it's Jason Worley and Ken Clark, but not tonight. It's Libertarian Thursday. Actually, every Thursday should be Libertarian Thursday on Grassroots Radio Colorado.
I'd be glad with just one day a week.
This voice is Stacy Petty.
The good-looking one, STP.
The other voice is the one and only
David K. Williams Jr.
You know, Jason called me earlier today. Jason was supposed to be in here, but apparently he was ill. Although he sounded fine when he called on the phone. He was very chipper. I think
he didn't bother to fake it.
No. But, he said, well, DK is coming in.
DK wins.
And it kind of cracks me up because we have probably about a dozen different things that we call you. And
some of them you can even say on there.
Some of them you can say on there. But we have a great show lined up for you tonight. Lots to talk about, and it's going to be a lot of the typical fare that David and I get pretty passionate about.
We're going to jump right in head first. We're not going to wade in. But before we get to our first guest, who we're very glad to have, I want to remind everyone you can check out Stacy's blog at Carolina. I always do that. Colorado Blonde.
Oh, you are a Carolina native.
ColoradoBlonde.com.
And there's an E in the blonde because that's the proper feminine
That's the way you spell
spelling.
it. Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. Right.
And at libertycast.net, and I will have an announcement about that later on within the show about something I'm going to be doing that's going to be on there very soon. I'm very excited.
Stay tuned and check out libertycast.net. Of course, you can find me at bluecarp.com. That's blue like the color, carp like the fish. Follow me on Twitter at bluecarp and on Facebook.
I gave it Twitter years ago. Good for you to stay with it.
I'm there, baby. I'm there. And one of the things I did back in North Carolina was I did some post-conviction death penalty work. So that's what we're jumping into head first. We're not wading in.
And for those that are not in the know, David K. is an attorney. So this is his field of expertise, and so we can trust his words.
I appreciate that. I'm not quite sure if I would go that far about trusting me, but I'll do my best. And we are glad to have Marc Hyden on the radio with us. He's calling in. He is with Conservatives Concerned About the Death Penalty. Before joining Equal Justice USA, which is the, I guess, kind of like the parent organization for conservatives concerned about the death penalty, he was with the NRA, the National Rifle Association, where he was a campaign field rep for the state of Florida. He's also been involved with congressional races in western North Carolina. That's my part of the world. And has also worked with the Georgia Emergency Management Agency and is a legislative aide in the Georgia Senate. So you sound like another Southerner, Mark.
For the most part of my life, I've been in the Southeast and very proud of that.
I can tell. I love the way it sounds.
Yeah, thank you so much, David and Stacy, for having me on the show.
Well, thank you, Mark. And, of course, out here, we just had a big sentencing with Austin Sigg, who confessed to and admitted to killing a young girl and horribly mutilating her in another assault he was involved with. He got life without possibility of parole. We've got the Aurora Theater trial ongoing. The trial hasn't actually started. They're still doing motions. Of course, that made national news. Multiple people were killed in that theater in Aurora. So the death penalty is a big issue here in Colorado. And Mark, you're with conservatives concerned about the death penalty. Tell us why conservatives should be concerned about the death penalty.
Well, we have many conservatives and libertarians that are involved in our organization and that are connected with us and coordinate with us. And each person comes to the realization that the death penalty just doesn't work for a multitude of reasons. For me personally, I really wanted to support the death penalty when I was younger, and I gave it what I called the conservative litmus test to see if it stood up to conservative principles and values. And I asked myself, is the death penalty pro-life? Well, of course not. You run a real risk of killing innocent people, and over 140 people have been released from death row because they're wrongfully convicted. Is it fiscally responsible? The answer to that is also no, because it's far more expensive than life without parole. And lastly, I asked myself, well, is this representative of a limited government? And the answer is to that is no. Giving the government the power to kill U.S. citizens is not representative of a limited government.
Yeah, Mark, this is Stacy. I am very excited to speak to you this evening because I was telling David before the show, I am making my way out of my Republican fog, and I am a registered libertarian at this point, and I've really taken on that aspect of studying everything that I think I believe in through the lens of a libertarian mindset. And the thing that really struck me one day, I have spent my entire life being adamantly in support of capital punishment, eye for an eye. I did believe it only to be the fair option to bring out any type of justice on this planet. But as I developed my libertarian thinking and distrusting the government about this and distrusting the government about that, it kind of struck me one day, if I can't trust the government with all these other things, how can I entrust the state with the actual life of a human being? Is it their responsibility? Is it their right to carry out that kind of justice?
You know, you make several great points, and this is an authority that the government doesn't deserve and can't be trusted with. I don't trust the government to deliver a piece of mail, let alone make life and death decisions, and we don't have to look too far to see other failures in government, which can be analogous to the death penalty. We've seen $600 million get poured into healthcare.gov, and it still doesn't work. It's a website that doesn't work. The government can't get a website to work, but we're supposed to believe that they can run a program to kill U.S. citizens, and the truth is the government just has problems with running programs with proper efficacy and efficiency. And in my opinion, life is far too precious to be put up to something that's so mistake-prone.
I think you're absolutely right, Mark. If you disagree with Mark, and a lot of people do, you can call us here at KLZ 560 The Source, 303-477-5600. And one of the things you said, Mark, that I think a lot of people, I find, jump on this. You noted that life without parole costs less than implementing the death penalty. And I think a lot of people go, how could that possibly be true? And could you explain that?
Absolutely. There's been many studies done in multiple states that have found that it's far more expensive than life without parole. And the reason for that is the initial trials are twice as long and sometimes up to 6 times as long as a study was shown in Colorado as a life without parole trial. And there's a separate sentencing trial to determine whether or not you can receive capital punishment. So already you've got twice as many trials, and those trials are much longer than the regular life without parole trials. There's more attorneys involved. There's more legal fees, there's more specialists, and much more forensic science or, quote, science done in those. Then you go to the appeals process, which I want to remind everybody, the appeals process is not there to introduce new evidence. It's just to see if you had a fair trial. And this is far more exhaustive than any other appeals process because we want to make sure, the government wants to make sure they don't execute innocent people. But it's far longer, far more expensive, and then we also house them on death row, which is far more expensive than general population in a maximum security prison. And I'll remind you that they're on this death row. Many of them are actually dying of old age and of natural causes because they're there so long.
Well, I think what I hear often is, we can solve all those problems, Mark. Let's just execute them within 1 year of them being found guilty. Won't that solve the problem? All right, take them out back to the courthouse immediately and shoot them.
Sure. Well, I'd like to go back to my friend who was the Rutherford County GOP chairman in North Carolina, and he said there's no oops moment. And when you cut short the appeals process, you guarantee innocent people are going to be killed. And there's no redo when that happens. You can't right that wrong. A life, like I said, is far too precious to be killed, especially when they're innocent. And when you cut short that process, that's what happens. And many of these people have exhausted their appeals processes that were available and later still found to be not guilty. guilty. So when you cut that short, you're really, really playing with fire.
We're talking with Marc Hyden, who's with the conservatives concerned about the death penalty, especially important topically here in Colorado as the Aurora shooting trial is eventually going to get underway. They're still doing pretrial motions on that. And Mark, one thing you mentioned was, I can't remember the exact number, but it was over 100 people that have been exonerated from death row. What was that number? And talk a little bit about that.
Just the other day, a man out of Missouri became the 143rd person to be released from death row because they're wrongfully convicted since 1973. How many others were actually put to death who were innocent? We don't really know. The government obviously doesn't like to go back and show the faults when killing innocent people. It's not in their best interest. But yes, this is a problem, and we're finding with these appeals processes that what the government and judicial system relies upon, this forensic evidence, is oftentimes flawed. The FBI is releasing, or actually going over several cases, over 20 to be actually, that they had relied on hair analysis to sentence people to death, and they found out that it was unreliable. So we're seeing time and time again that the technology and evidence that we rely on is unreliable at best, and we can't rely on that if there's lives in the balance.
This is Grassroots Radio Colorado. I'm DK Williams, sitting in alongside with STP, Stacy, Trier, and Petty, and we're speaking with Marc Hyden from Conservatives Concerned About the Death Penalty. Mark, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the trend nationally concerning the death penalty and some about what's going on here in Colorado with the death penalty.
This is Grassroots Radio Colorado on KLZ 560, The Source.
The Liberal Spin. That's what you will find in most of today's papers. You need Common Sense News. Common Sense News is Colorado's leading source of news, commentary, and editorials. Common Sense News is available for front door delivery by calling 720-400-6234 or 719-302-1900. Visit our website at commonsensenewsusa.com.
Every month, Common Sense features articles that impact you and your family. Issues like our Second Amendment, healthcare, taxes, education reform, and so much more. Contact us today for your subscription and go to commonsensenewsusa.com.
Your healthy radio addiction.
They're still clinging to this fantasy, though, that people are going to ultimately, like, what did the president say to try to get people to just calm down?
The Laura Ingraham Show.
A few years from now, when people are using this to get coverage, everybody's feeling pretty good about all the choices and competition that they've got, there are going to be a whole bunch of folks who say, I always thought this provision was excellent.
They've scrubbed the references to Obamacare. They don't want it to be called Obamacare any longer. And why would they? I mean, just during the debates with Mitt Romney, he was happy to call it Obamacare. But now he doesn't really want to own this disaster.
The Laura Ingraham Show, weekday mornings at 7 on KLZ 560, The Source.
They must maintain the fact that America is a nation of bigots. They must. Otherwise, they're done.
Jason Lewis.
Now, Oprah points to Representative Joe Wilson of South Carolina, who I think should not have shouted, "You lie," at the health care address to Congress. These sorts of levels of disrespect happen all the time, and they're unfortunate. But this is especially intriguing, given the fact that Joe Wilson was suggesting the president wasn't telling the truth when he said people could, keep their health care plan. So Wilson turned out to be right, even though it was an inopportune time to make your point, and yet that's evidence of racism. Wait a minute, he was right. He wasn't making a charge that was irrational. The president either did know or knew and lied about the Affordable Care Act. So now all of this criticism and Wilson's comments, even though true, even though accurate, is representative of racism in America. How do you square that?
Jason Lewis, weeknights, 7 to 10 on KLZ 560, The Source.
You're listening to Grassroots Radio Colorado on the Colorado Conservative, KLZ 560, The Source.
And we're back on Grassroots Radio Colorado. I'm very happy to be sitting next to Stacy, Trier, and Petty, STP. Find her at coloradoblonde.com. I'm David K. Williams Jr. We're pinch hitting for the first team. Ken Clark and Jason Worley are out. We're very glad to have Marc Hyden with us on the phone for another segment. He's with the National Conservative, the Conservatives Concerned About the Death Penalty. He is the National Conservative Outreach Specialist for EJUSA, Equal Justice USA. Mark, tell people how they can find out more about your organization and what you do there and what EJUSA does.
Sure. Sure. Well, EJUSA is a broader nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that looks to make a criminal justice system that works for everybody. And what I work on is the conservatives concerned about the death penalty project, which they oversee. And what we do, we're a national network of conservatives and libertarians who believe the death penalty is really inconsistent with our principles, our values, and our philosophies. And we have some specific goals to really shatter the myth out there that conservatives blindly support the death penalty, because we don't. We've seen a lot of our biggest supporters. Ron Paul endorsed our group and came out against the death penalty. Jay Sekulow, Brent Bozell have also spoke out against the death penalty. And we want to provide a forum for these guys, for the grass tops and the grassroots, to have discussions about the failures of the death penalty and how we should respond. And additionally, obviously, we want to educate the grassroots and the grass tops. And we're out there doing that. Today I'm doing that with you by going out on media or going to different conferences. We were able to go to CPAC St. Louis, and LPAC as well, and we were able to talk to many conservatives who, for the first time, noticed they were not the only conservative out there that opposed the death penalty. And as we're seeing the national trends, we're actually at an all-time low for support for the death penalty. And David, you may know from being in North Carolina, a poll recently came out that showed that 68% of North Carolinians support repealing the death penalty if they replace it with life without parole and with a project or a program to where the offender can work to pay restitution to the victim's family members. And the majority of those polled were conservatives. So the narrative, the national narrative is changing.
That's certainly a good thing. I'm glad to hear that about North Carolina. And I do think people are coming to realize, especially that identify as conservatives, that if you believe in limited government, it makes no sense to trust the government who they're going to kill.
You know, and David and I were talking during the break. I'm not sure if you are familiar off the top of your head with the case of Nathan Dunlap here in Colorado. It's been, oh my goodness, 20 years now, Dave?
I believe so.
That he walked into a Chuck E. Cheese and killed numerous people. He was sentenced to death, and this past summer, our Governor Hickenlooper, rescinded that. What is the definition? What is the legal term that he did? He
didn't give him a reprieve. He didn't say, you're not going to be killed.
He just postponed.
He said, you're not going to be executed while I'm governor.
But this has become a point of contention among the GOP gubernatorial candidates, and this is going to be part of the campaign. And, I mean, if you have any advice on a way that we can message this to conservatives to understand that perhaps this isn't the role of government, I would appreciate hearing.
Sure, and I believe what happened, he gave Dunlop an indefinite stay, and that was unpopular with certain people. But really, you know, you see certain cases where it's very obvious that the offender is guilty and has done some terrible things. But it's important to remember there may be perfect cases where it seems obvious that they're guilty, but there's no perfect system that we can run the death penalty process on. And I think that's what we need to do, is step back, not look at the individual cases, but ask ourselves, as humans, can we manage a program that is perfect? Because that's the level we need when we're dealing with human life, especially innocent human life. Ask ourselves, as a limited government, can we have this power and can we wield it correctly? And I think the answer to that is no. We need to step back and have some humility.
Well, I mean, as I identify myself as a Christian, I do believe that there is justice after this world, and so I kind of would like to leave that in the hands of who I believe our Creator is. And I know I run into a lot of Christian individuals that prefer to look at these situations as an eye for an eye, as opposed to not, entrusting this monumental decision in the hands of the government. But I was talking to Dave during the break that, as Christians, which, I mean, it's irrelevant to me if you are or you're not and what your line of thinking is here. But I would ask for individuals that do identify themselves as Christians, your religion instructs you to be forgiving to this individual and give them the opportunity to seek forgiveness and find their path to eternity with our Creator, whoever you might think it be, in heaven. So if there's the opportunity there for that individual to make peace with God, and I don't think you can necessarily make peace with the friends and families of the victims. That's a different situation. But I always find it interesting, the almost, in my opinion, it's almost like a hypocrisy that we're not necessarily adhering to our religious beliefs because we're going off of what our gut is telling us and not maybe necessarily what our intellect is telling us. If that makes any sense. I know it's kind of mumbled there together, but it's a rash of thoughts.
And I'd like to say, I mean, I don't hide it at all. I'm definitely a Christian. My dad, I grew up as a PK. But I would
Preacher's
like
kid,
to,
for those that don't get that.
I'd like to.
Our condolences, by the way.
Oh, that's fine. I turned out all right, I think.
Yes, you always do.
I do want to address a couple things. First, you mentioned the eye for an eye, and I hear that very frequently. But biblically, the eye for an eye was a limitation. It was not a mandate. It says if you murder my family member, I can't go murder your whole family. There's a limitation. I can't go beyond an eye for an eye, but that doesn't mandate that must be done. And I also would like to point out that Jesus did say, "Those without sin cast the first stone." But everybody's going to interpret the Bible differently, and they're more than welcome to. I like to use the Bible as a moral compass and not necessarily a policy document. But with that said, conservatives, we believe we should be tough on crime, and I believe we can be tough on crime, but we can be smart on crime too. And putting innocent lives at risk, spending exorbitant amounts of money, that's not being smart on crime.
You know what's funny is what you're doing here, your goal here. This is something that a lot of those who are left of center strongly believe in as well. And so I guess my question would be to you is what kind of interest do you see from those who identify themselves as liberals/Democrats?
Well, most of my time is actually working with libertarians and conservatives. So most of my work doesn't cross over. But I was actually told by our PR guy the other day that we were on MSNBC on the Lawrence O'Donnell show. So I was able to see a copy of that, and I would like to say the nicest thing about Lawrence O'Donnell because he actually came out and said Ron Paul is doing a great service by coming out against the death penalty, and we may have differences, but this is something the left and the right can do together and we can agree on. And he would actually give Ron Paul a standing ovation. And what we're doing right now, we live in a world where bipartisanship is taboo, and this is one issue where the left and right can come together and work on a solution together, and I believe there's something beautiful in that.
This is Grassroots Radio Colorado on KLZ 560 The Source. STP, Stacy Petty, and I, David K. Williams, are sitting in for Ken Clark and Jason Worley. We're talking with Marc Hyden, with conservatives concerned about the death penalty. And I don't want to get too far into the theological woods here, but as someone who grew up going to Sunday school in the Southern Baptist Church, and if the church doors were open Sunday night and Wednesday, I was there.
Right there with you, Dave.
That whole thing about eye for an eye, to me, is blasphemous, because the only place that's in the Bible is when Jesus said it on the Sermon on the Mount, and he said, that's what you've heard, but I'm here to tell you to turn the other cheek. Now, that's a whole nother conversation, but I want to point out the only time that's used is when Jesus says, that's not what I'm here to tell you to do. So I'll leave that at that. And going on to just the policy aspects of the death penalty and how much it costs to implement, and the mistakes that are inherent in any type of government program, because that's what our criminal justice system is. It's a government program, and it is necessary to put the bad guys in jail. But as you mentioned earlier, Mark, there's no makeup for killing an innocent person. And do you have any examples of, or some of the more egregious examples of people that have been on death row and were ultimately found to be completely innocent?
There have been a lot of people that have been put to death and probably should not have. I mean, there have been some that have been posthumously pardoned. But if you look at Troy Davis in Georgia, he should not have been executed. It's quite sure of that. Carlos De Luna was executed based on one person's eyewitness testimony, who later said, I'm 50% sure he was the guy. And, you can't execute people using that standard. That can't be done. Claude Jones was executed using the same hair analysis I talked about earlier. And they did DNA testing on that hair after he had been executed, found out it wasn't his hair. There's terrible things that happen when you run this program, and you run it like the government is running it. Cameron Todd Willingham in Texas, he was executed for arson. He was said that he burned his house down and killed his children. And it turned out that the testimony that was the linchpin for the trial was this expert who said, if you look at the way the fire was done, it was clearly arson, and it was clearly Cameron Todd Willingham who did it. Well, after he was executed, I believe it was 7 experts came in and said that's not science. What this was a tragic accident, and it was not arson. So we have several examples of people that were executed that should not have been, and that is a tragedy in itself.
I think this is a prime example of pointing out, I mean, as you were saying in our first thing in regards to, the PPACA website, that it's not functioning. We have this multi-million, hundreds of $1 million mess that it's at the hands of the government. And this is, again, literally playing with the actual lives of individuals. And if we can't trust your government to, not give you a fraudulent traffic ticket, why would you trust them with carrying out that sentence on another individual?
And I hear often that, it's a jury of people's peers that decide whether or not a person gets the death penalty. And I just point out that it's a government official, a DA, who decides whether or not to bring charges or to pursue the death penalty. It's a government official who decides what evidence comes in, a judge, and it's the government agents who conduct the investigation originally to determine what evidence should be found.
It's the government agents that choose those party of peers as well.
Yes.
So at every level there is the involvement of the state.
Yes.
Sure, and there's a framework that's put in place by the government that favors the government. You won't be allowed to serve on a capital trial unless you support capital punishment. It's not exactly a jury of your peers.
Mark, we're talking with Marc Hyden with conservatives concerned about the death penalty. We've only got about 30 seconds left. Mark, tell people again how to find out more information about your organization.
I would love to talk to them individually if they'd like. I would love for them to give me a shout-out or shoot me an email at info@conservativesconcern.org, or you can go to our website, conservativesconcern.org. We have a lot of fact sheets, information, and I encourage them to sign up for updates there, and as well as check out our parent organization, EJUSA, at EJUSA.org.
I will post that on the Grassroots radio wall so that the listeners can have easy access to it.
Very good. Thanks a lot, Mark. We look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you, guys.
Grassroots Radio Colorado on KLZ 560, The Source. Join the show. Call now, 303-477-5600, 477-5600.